right, welcome back to the party that is the Mighty VH Podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Tor. The guy next to me, his name is Tommy London. Tommy, tell them what they're in for today. Tell them
Well,
what they won.
today, today is one of the ultimate bouts that have been discussed throughout the years with the Van Halen fans, and I'm not talking about Sammy versus Dave, though. That is a discussion that does get brought up more than just time to time. I'm talking about the debut records when Sammy went to Van Halen, and it turned into a Van Hagar 5150 against Dave Lee Roth's debut solo full-length debut solo album, Eat 'Em and Smile. And I want it to be known that Tor and I did not discuss what we were wearing today before we arrived here. This is hilarious. I couldn't believe it when we got on here. I was laughing my ass off.
Who would have thought two guys doing a podcast about Van Halen might wear the same thing once in a while? Who would have thought that?
Oh man, I don't have an Eat 'Em and Smile shirt. Not saying I would have worn it instead of this, but I didn't have that choice. And with the theme, I ran with this, right. And it's such an iconic album cover. And we'll get into all that today. And it's going to be a fun episode.
Basically, it's two albums, two futures. In 1986, suddenly you had the most anticipated releases of the year. You had 5150 coming out in March. I believe Dave's Eat 'Em and Smile came out a couple months later, which we'll get into. But both very eagerly awaited. I can recall when, I was walking down the street one day, I want to say, the year before, when it was announced that Sammy Hagar was going to be the singer in Van Halen. I happened to not be, it was one of the few moments I wasn't glued to MTV. And I'm walking down the street, headed to a friend's house, and another friend pops out of his door and says, "Hey, Sammy Hagar is going to be the new singer of Van Halen." And like, it was pandemonium from that moment on. Like, oh, that's an interesting choice. And,
Yeah, I remember that buzz too. Now that you bring that up, I haven't thought about that really since then. Yeah, hearing that he was the singer, thinking, well, he's great. We all know that he's great. And everyone was trying to figure out who would be the singer for Van Halen. Dave Lee Roth was trying to figure out what they were going to do. Probably, I think he thought to himself, there ain't no way
they're done.
That they're going to, we'll get back together and it'll be fine. Like, let me just do this real quick, whatever. But yeah, that was wild, Sam. And you know what? The anticipation built up from the magazines that, we picked up from the newsstand, the Hit Paraders and all that stuff, and MTV. They were building this moment up for us all. Got us even more jacked up to see and hear what was going on.
I mean, listen, it was a time when, what else was going on in rock and roll? Like, this was the big story that hit all the magazines. Every month they were talking about the new albums coming, or once they were out, the battle between the two camps, etc. It still remains to be headline news to this day. Anytime someone talks about it, any of the former members talk about that period, they've got to make a headline out of it. Which, to be honest with you, I'm a little tired of, but I'm all for a good headline.
I don't think there's ever been a band like this where it was a soap opera or a wrestling match that tied in with the band. I mean, there isn't.
Interesting.
Like, this was it. And this was, look, you heard all the stories of Van Halen when Dave was there, the fun stories. And, maybe they did or didn't get along, whatever. But after is when all the soap opera stuff really came about. And it was, I was just as glued to that as I was to hearing when the music came out,
Right.
And
I don't think
it was wild.
I think to your point, I can't really think of another band situation where there was such a soap opera. I mean, listen, a few years later on, there was the Motley Crue Vince Neil thing, which had its own headlines, but I think that became constant headlines, because there was always the he said sort of situation that Van Halen also had. But I think prior to Van Halen, they were in a very unique situation in that, it's not like the singer died, right? So AC/DC, Bon Scott dies, they get a new singer. That's the end of the story. To a certain extent, there's certainly no finger pointing after that fact. Bon Scott's dead. With Van Halen, they had had big shoes to fill as well, but the singer's still alive. Like, he's still, his toes are still tapping, so to speak. And, he's got something to say about it, and no one's going to stop Dave from saying anything. which we came to find months and months after the release, years, decades after the release of these albums. So let's get into it. 5150, released on March 24th, 1986. It hits the Billboard #1 position on April 26th for 1 week. Okay, it's not like a multi-week, multi-month takeover, but for a week, they had the #1 album in the country. By May 28th, by 2 months later, basically, the album had already hit double platinum status. By October of that year, it hit triple platinum status. By 1989, it hit quadruple platinum status. By 94, slowed down. Sales have slowed down by 94, but still hit 5 times platinum. And by 2004, by the reunion with Sammy, you've got a 6-time platinum debut album by this formation of the band, which is a testament to, the staying power, whether you're pro Sammy, pro Dave, or whatever. We're not going to get into it, but you've got to admit, like, an album that sells 6 million copies is a pretty good album. Is probably a pretty good album. Hard to argue against that.
Yeah. Let's note one thing. No videos propelled. Really? I mean, really, right?
Right. Not any official videos, right? So what we wound up having with Van Halen was a band who, was going to finally was a band that was going to call their own shots. The singer and, the former singer was pushing videos. These guys were like, we don't need videos. I don't want to do videos. And they had the clout and the juice to tell their record label, we're not doing videos, in a time when video was everything. You couldn't put out an album without a video. So they really bucked the system by not putting out a video. And they had great radio play. And while they didn't have videos on MTV was not going to let them skate by without covering Van Halen. Because again, it was a big story in the music world. So they did the Unleashed, I think it was either half-hour or hour special that they played a few, many times. I can't tell you how many times they played it, because I know I recorded it on VHS and watched it to the point where I knew every little breath of dialogue that was uttered in that special. And so while MTV didn't have videos to play, they played that a bunch, and they were constantly in the music news, right? The MTV music news, even if it was just a random stop on the tour, they would make note of it, just because people tuned in. When you're talking about Van Halen, people tuned in. And the same thing went for Dave, obviously. But with 5150, you have, Why Can't This Be Love, released as a single, hit #3. You have Dreams, released as a single, as an actual single, which then, I'm not sure how it came about. And I really couldn't find any research on why the Blue Angels released this promotional video with this song, Van Halen song, Dreams, on it. I don't know where the collaboration came from. The song absolutely kind of fits that vibe of flying, and it's such a uplifting, major type song, very happy, uplifting type sounding song. The vibe is there, so it matched, but it wasn't an official video from the band themselves. You weren't watching Eddie play. You weren't seeing Sammy sing or anything. So hard to really take it. In an age of extravagant videos, big budgets, that was hardly a Van Halen video. It wasn't until later on, when they do the MTV Music Awards on September 5th of that year, where they are simulcast during the awards ceremony. And they're actually playing LA at the time. And they played a couple of songs that they simulcast live. I believe it was Summer Nights and Best of Both Worlds was what they played on. But other than that, to your point, no MTV video.
I was wondering, though, if behind the scenes, the record label might have said, hey, I find that hard to believe, too, that the label went along with, let's let the music do the talking, but maybe they were in fear of David Lee Roth. He ran the visual and MTV in comparison to the rest of the guys in Van Halen. But Sammy Hagar had some fun videos. They weren't at David Lee Roth's stature. But when you have the Blue Angels, like, how did that come about? I mean, I'm thinking behind the curtain. Like I said, the label was like, hey, we got to put something out there. And if you guys aren't into it, you don't have to be in it, but we're going to go this way. Someone in that corporate office thought this was a great idea.
Right. I mean, it absolutely could be. You never know, those sort of like under the table sort of conversations or behind, closed boardroom doors. Like, we got to do something about this, because there was money to be made. And if they were doing this well without a video, they could be doing this better with a video. And, but let's not forget, Van Halen and David Lee Roth, both on the same label, right? So they're both on Warner Brothers. It's not as if they had separate camps, if they had to do press or meet with their A&R guy or whatever, and they had to go up to the offices, they might have crossed paths. So you never know with that. But also Van Halen had the juice. They were on top of the world where they could be like, we're not doing a video. Like, we're just not going to do it, guys. Like, capture us live. They were all, the press at the time, any interviews you read with them, they were all about how great the band was, how great they were finally a band. It was 4 musicians. It wasn't 3 musicians and a singer. And so they wanted the music to do the talking. So I think that whole live thing, they had an opportunity. Oh, MTV wants to shoot us at a show. Perfect. Let it rip. And I remember, I saw that tour in August and then seeing them on MTV doing simulcast live. I mean, they were so tight. They sounded so like that might as well have been Live Without a Net, with a little fix here and there. There was no reason to fix any of it. They were broadcasting it live on MTV and it was great. They were on top of the world, so to speak.
Yeah, no pun intended.
No pun intended.
I remember the 45 when the song had dropped, had the picture of the band with the straitjackets on. Do you have that picture?
I had that. Yep. We'll put it up on the screen here. Yes, I still do have it. I don't have it in front of me, but do you remember the B-side to that?
Was it Get Up?
It was Get Up. Right.
Yeah.
So now the first song you're hearing from this new band is Why Can't This Be Love? Oh my God, what a great track. Totally different than anything Dave would have done. And then you've got Get Up on the other side, and you're like, what? This band is insane. What is this song? It was the most energetic. You thought Hot for Teacher was like, cinematic and drum heavy and fast paced, but man, you hear Get Up and it was like, oh, they kicked it up a notch or 2 from that.
Yeah. I think they had to do that on the B side because they had this poppy song and they had to say, hey, we didn't forget you. We're going to turn it up, but here's a little teaser as to what's to come.
All right, so let's get into Eat 'Em and Smile. Tommy, what do you got?
Smile. So before we go into Eat 'Em and Smile, let's take a funny little transition here that I've always found interesting. All right. Early on in Van Halen's career, when they first started, Ted Templeman produced all the Van Halen stuff with Dave. That first record, Ted, and he said this in his autobiography, wasn't sold on Dave. That he actually pitched to the label about replacing David Lee Roth with a guy by the name of Sammy Hagar. 10 years, roughly, it became a reality.
True
so
story.
Here's Ted, who was like, I don't want to maybe work with this guy. Whatever. The next day, apparently, Dave won him over. History was made. Here's the irony of this whole thing. After Van Halen runs its course with Dave, right before Van Hagar had become a thing, Sammy does a solo record called VOA. Ted Templeman produced that record, okay? And then Sammy joins Van Halen. This guy's premonition from day one, and he doesn't produce that record, 5150. Oh, no, he goes over with Dave to produce Eat 'Em and Smile. You can't make this shit up, man.
Right. And interesting to do that. I wonder if it was artistic allegiance or if there was money involved, right? So is Dave just giving him a better deal? Like, hey, I'll give you points on the album. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. Like, is there an incentive for Ted to go? Because Ted's long-standing engineer, Don Landy, sticks around in the Van Halen camp. He wants to work at 5150 with Ed. They had a great relationship. And so basically the band and Don Landy make 5150 with, Mick Jones from Foreigner overseeing it. To what degree is a little fuzzy. But they made a great record with Don and the band. And now Ted Templeman is over in Dave country doing the Dave thing. I always wondered that as well, but I questioned the incentive there.
That's a really good question. And the one thing I've often wondered is, because even though they weren't friends or friendly in terms of the Van, I'm going to say Van Hagar so we can, differentiate here with Dave. There's definitely, hey, did you hear anything over there? Like that has to be going on, man. Like, hey, who's in the band? That has to be. They can deny it until whatever, but that's just how it is. That's the reality. Yeah. Someone's snooping, right?
For sure. And, listen, we've all been in bands where like someone leaves the band and your next new song you write is like, oh man, they're going to wish that they were a part of this. That sort of thing comes about. And I'm sure that they were both feeling that as the songs were kind of coming to fruition for the albums, right?
Right. And that's why I think maybe, is Ted not doing their record? Let me reach out to Ted because I'm going to keep that Van Halen sound as much as I can.
Oh,
You
interesting.
know what I mean? Oh,
Interesting.
wait, they don't have Ted? Okay, I'm going to get Ted and I'm going to
I
make
think
this bombastic record.
so I'm of the impression and have been under the impression that as soon as Dave jumped ship, he gathered his troops.
Yeah.
Like he approached Ted at that point, knowing he was going to be making an album. He grabbed Ted, and if maybe not right away, because if we all recall, like Dave was working on a movie called Crazy from the Heat,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so that I think that's one of the reasons Dave's album comes out so much later than 5150, right? So 5150 comes out basically at the end of March. Dave's album doesn't come out until June. And I think that those dates sort of correlate with, the movie project kind of going south. And now he's playing catch up to do an album, which he was eventually going to do anyway, obviously. But I always thought it was odd that those albums didn't come out at the same time or closer together, and we can kind of get into the Eat 'em and Smile stuff as we dive into it. My particular thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll get into that right now with Eat 'em and Smile. But one thing too, do you think maybe that was a strategic move on Dave's part? Well, let me hear what they got going on. Oh, well, it's a keyboard kind of driven record. Here we go.
Right. Yeah.
And then who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know.
Right. Because, realistically, they both had to be working on the albums around the same time, give or take. Right. So
Sure.
unless someone's sneaking Dave some stuff, a cassette or something, no one's hearing anything. You know what I mean? Like, unless stuff is leaking out, no one's really hearing anything, because then the album comes out. Dave doesn't certainly put an album together in 2 months,
Right.
like between March and July, or however many months that is. But, listen, all of that sort of folklore, et cetera, is great to kind of dive into, and wish we could like be a fly on the wall when,
Well, that's the one thing too, man, is that they act like after the records came out, from that one moving forward, each camp has said, I've never listened to any of his or theirs records. Stop it. Of course you did. You were in a supermarket, and Why Can't This Be Love came on, Dave. I got news for you. It did. Right? Okay. Hey, I could see like Sammy Hagar definitely checked it out. Not because of anything like, I'm here and you're there, or just he's a music guy. He's probably like, oh, let me hear what's he got going on,
Right.
just out of just a love of music, I would have to think.
Sure.
Eddie
sure.
and Alex had to have tuned in and be like, oh, let me see. They got that Steve Vai guy and this and that, whatever.
Billy Shane,
Yeah. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't
Well, listen, I'll take it a step further. In one of my dreams is that someone out there, an AI fanatic out there, will take the music from the Sammy era and put in Dave vocals.
Yeah.
Someone in AI land needs to, get the Dave cadence of lyrics and delivery and all that stuff, program that into AI, take the Van Halen music straight from those years without Dave. And I'd love to hear what Dave would have done with all this music that Eddie wrote post Dave years, Summer Nights with Dave vocals, not singing Summer Nights, right? Dave would have written something different. Or what would he have even done for Dreams if he would have even bothered listening to it, because he didn't like the keyboard direction, whatever. Finish What You Started with Dave, what would that have been like?
Yeah.
And nowadays, like, I've been wondering that since forever, but nowadays it can be done. So anyone out there listening who's into AI and needs a project to do, get back to us. And Tommy, tell them where they can email us.
But at the Mighty Van Halen Podcast at gmail.com.
Right.
Hey, you know what? To add to that, I've always thought it'd be cool, and now you can do it even more so. Take the isolated vocals off of the first 2 Dave records, or even go deeper if you want the other ones, and then just get the music on some of the Van Hagar stuff
and see how it matches up.
You might have to, you might have to speed up a vocal, a little Alvin and the Chipmunks kind of thing going on, maybe, or the music or whatever. And then you'd have to really do a lot of work. Like Get Up could work with something like Yankee Rose. I don't know. Like
Interesting.
You have to really do the math,
But all of those mashups are, they're my favorite. I love a good mashup.
So, or a mashup.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And listen, We're too busy doing this podcast, you guys. Someone else out there needs to do this and hit us up, because we've just got too much going on. But you guys hit some buttons and make that happen. We'd
Make it happen. That'd be great. But you're right. I haven't heard a mashup of a Dave solo with the Van Hagar stuff. But that leads us into Eat 'Em and Smile, Dave Lee Roth's debut solo record. Don't argue with me and tell me Crazy from the Heat was the debut. That was an EP. This is his first full-length rock record. His response to Van Halen 5150. You fired first, I will fire last, and I'm bringing the cannons. I built a band that's filled with Eddie Van Halens, and they include Steve Vai, Billy Sheehan on the bass, Steve Vai on guitar, if you're not aware, and Greg Bissonette on the drums. He came out with all guns a-blazing, and he did use MTV, unlike his former bandmates. Eat 'Em and Smile hit number 4 on the Billboard charts, and Yankee Rose, the debut single, which came out right before the summer, right in the summer. The album itself came out on June 7th. He was going for that whole, firecracking on the 4th of July sort of thing, I guess. And Yankee Rose was actually written about the Statue of Liberty that was celebrating its 100th anniversary that year.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so that, and Steve Stevens was originally approached to play guitar for Dave on Eat 'Em and Smile. He had to turn it down because he was, he's Billy Idol's right-hand man. I think they were working on Whiplash Smile around that time.
Oh, interesting.
And so he couldn't do it. Though I'll tell you what, I would have loved to have heard, even if it was just a song. I think Steve Stevens would have been a strong choice with Dave as well.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Anything.
One of the things about Steve Vai's playing just inherently as a guitarist, first of all, I just want to say off the bat, Steve Vai is like my number 2 guy next to Ed. I love Steve Vai. I've always loved him, even before he was hooked up with Dave. But I think Steve is an incredible guitarist. One of the things that makes Eddie so special is that he's a virtuoso who can write a riff and who can write a song and who can put together these songs that transcend time, so to speak. Not every guitarist can do that. A lot of guitarists are just great guitarists. They can't necessarily write, but they can really play, and they can write, but they can't write hit songs. They can't write classic songs. They can write these kinds of songs, not those kinds of songs. So just because you're a guitarist or just because you're a musician doesn't make you a great writer. Steve is a great guitarist, but when you listen to Eat 'Em and Smile, I look for the hook. I look for the riff. Like, what is that riff, And yeah. Steve definitely brought to the table. He was the right guy for the right job. There wasn't, in my opinion, a better guy suited to stand next to Dave on stage than Steve Vai. Hands down. I was so upset when Steve and Dave weren't working together anymore. But when you listen to Yankee Rose, what's the riff? It's the lyric. You got the lyric down and you've got this great arrangement, which is fantastic. And you've got a really strong song. But I think one of the reasons that you still hear Summer Nights on the radio, or Why Can't This Be Love on the radio, and you don't hear Yankee Rose much on the radio anymore, is because it's missing a certain element that I think was kind of missing from the whole album. But that's just me, in my opinion. Let's go back to the stats. Sorry.
Well, it did sell over millions of copies, and it was a huge success for Dave, but it didn't hit, like I mentioned, it hit number 4. It didn't hit number 1. Dave Lee Roth actually has never had a number 1 album. Van Hagar has always had a number 1 album, though that being said, Van Hagar has never had a number 1 song, and Dave did with Van Halen and Jump. But the tour was a huge success as well. Did you see the Eat 'Em and Smile tour?
I actually did not see the Eat 'Em and Smile tour, and I regret it to this day.
Yeah, me too. I forget why I didn't go. I did see the 5150 tour. That was actually,
which is why we both have these shirts, and neither one of us has a Dave shirt because we didn't go to the show.
Hey, I'm just surprised it still fits. But yeah, I remember just seeing some of the footage on MTV, because Dave Lee Roth's on the road and whatever. But with the record, off the success of Dave Lee Roth's EP, Crazy from the Heat, that's why I think they also had like That's Life and I'm Easy on the record as a little segue of coming out of that EP into this rock album. And surprisingly enough, I don't know if you knew this, those 2 songs were released as singles. No video. There was a video for That's Life, but it was barely played on MTV. But they weren't pushed. And right. I think maybe they were a last-ditch effort because the other songs didn't really, Going Crazy, which was the second single, hit number 66. So it wasn't like a top 10 smash and
Right.
whatever. I think it was just an MTV thing, but I guess that didn't transcend into someone calling the radio station and saying, "Hey, play this song." But I think that's why maybe those two songs were released as singles, because they were more in the Just a Gigolo type of vibe, the crooner, the lounge singer thing. But they didn't take off for Dave in that way. And I think it was a smart play for Dave to come out with the whole, like I mentioned before, the guns a-blazing, because when Van Halen kind of softened their sound, and that's not a diss because I love all those records, but they went for a more, Dreams, great song, but it is definitely softer than stuff we were used to from Van Halen with Dave. That's why I also feel like, I'm not saying he wasn't recording this album while Sammy was with Van Halen there, but he probably had somebody snooping, or when it came out, it was probably like, hey, you know what, we're turning it up, because I know these guys are going to stick to this. So, and it was a smart play.
I think that Eat 'Em and Smile was definitely more bombastic. It was definitely Dave. It was definitely more showy. It was bigger. It was more colorful. I mean, even the cover. You've got Dave's cover with every color imaginable, and then you've got Van Halen, which is just a couple of colors, and it's a great cover, iconic, etc. It's stood the test of time, but kind of less dimensional than Eat 'Em and Smile. And I always thought it was interesting that Dave being Dave, how many covers on Eat 'Em and Smile, right? His debut album, he's got 3 or 4 covers on there. Was that because he was pressed to get an album out quick and they weren't writing as many songs, or they didn't have the time, or maybe that was just Dave's thing. Dave loves a good cover,
Well, he has a knack to make it his own. There's something, I don't know if you're aware of this, and or anyone listening, if you're not aware, I want you to do me a favor and check this out. A friend of mine mentioned this to me a while back. There's a guy by the name of Kim Mitchell. He's an amazing artist, all right? And he has a song. You have to go listen to this song. You have to promise me. It's called Kids in Action, all right? This song was going to be covered by Dave. They were going to do this song on Eat 'Em and Smile. And when you hear it, it sounds like it came off, not that it sounds like a song that came off of Eat 'Em and Smile, not a song that was going to be put on Eat 'Em and Smile. It's got a Ladies Night in Buffalo kind of riff to it. Maybe that actually inspired Ladies Night in Buffalo. I'm not certain, but you have to check this out. Kim Mitchell, Kids in Action, was a song that was supposed to be recorded for Eat 'Em and Smile. And that's another thing. There is no way that they only recorded 10 songs. Maybe even the song I just mentioned, there has to be a demo of it, even if it's, or instrumentals. There's no way that just 10 songs were recorded. What else is there? I ran into Greg Bissonette at one of the rock and roll fantasy camps a while back, and that was my first question for him. I said, there has to be more. Where's it at? What's going on? He claimed that they did record more songs. Now, I don't know if he means record as in Ted Templeman produced them. Are they produced songs? Or are they got into a room and let's see which ones we like, demos, maybe they're instrumentals with Steve Vai just ripping it. I want to hear that too.
Yeah.
Why don't they put out a deluxe edition of this? Side note, it's the 40th anniversary of both these records. And Correct. They did put out a 40th anniversary of 5150. Beautiful deluxe edition. If you don't have it or not familiar, you should check it out. It really is well put together. And I'm just like, why didn't they or Dave? It's probably the label who is in charge. But if David Lee Roth wanted to do something, I don't think they would say no.
Right.
And why not move forward and go, hey, let's put a deluxe edition of Eat 'Em and Smile. And
well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons that we love this band or this group of musicians is they're so frustrating, right? Like, why don't they give us more? Why do they do this? Why do they do that? For a while, listen, Different Kind of Truth wasn't available for streaming. And that was apparently Dave. Why would he? Why?
Right.
Because that's why. Because it gets us talking. We're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So why isn't there a box set for Eat 'Em and Smile? Just part and parcel. It's part and parcel of who these guys are. Just when you think you don't know.
Yeah.
When you want them to do something, they don't do something. It's just part of the little game that is the universe of Van Halen.
Well, Billy Sheehan a while back did an interview, and he mentioned that they have a pro shot. I'm sure they have more than one, but he was talking about one particular show. There was a pro shot of the Eat 'em and Smile tour. He says, "Man, it's beautiful. It sounds great. It's like perfect. I guess with the camera shots, whatever. I guess it was edited or whatever." And he was like, "I would love to release it because he has it." He goes, "But he can't legally. Dave Lee Roth or whatever has to do it." He goes, "I wish Dave would just put it out." Listen, I don't really buy DVDs anymore. I would buy those DVDs like that,
Right.
because I'd want to have it, and
Yeah.
in case it was never online again or something.
Yeah.
There's a market here
For sure.
for this stuff.
Well, listen, I mean, even all that footage that came out, last couple of years from, Donington in '84 with Van Halen playing Monsters of Rock, that footage looks great, and a few other shows from the 1984 tour, like you've seen pro shot footage come out, slipping away on YouTube before it gets taken down. There's some great looking stuff out there. Yeah, man. They have it. They have it. What are we doing, guys? Come on.
Yeah, come on, give it. That's the one thing I'll say about Kiss. And by the way, that just dawned on me that Kiss kind of had a soap opera thing, kind of not really, not like Van Halen, in my opinion. But like if Ace did an interview, he knew how to get you to read it. I'm going to throw these guys under the bus, and then they're like making records together behind the scenes. Anyway,
but again, just to throw this in there, true. But you didn't really hear of that until after this went down. You didn't hear about like Kiss and former members in 1986. Like there was no headlines talking about that. It wasn't until much later did they make headlines where they were squabbling and talking shit about each other. Listen, 10 years after this, Kiss reunites, so, you don't have the shit talk from the Kiss camp until much later on. But again, I think that this situation, to your point, this soap opera proved to be marketable. To keep the band's name in the headlines, and record sales would, reflect that. So,
for sure.
How much of it is organic and how much of it is marketing and, someone just pushing a little story from the label, who knows?
Yeah.
We'll never really know.
But hey, Rolling Stone magazine, when they had to choose between both these records, which one do you think they chose? Eat 'em and Smile or 5150?
That's a great question. I'm going to guess by the tone of your voice, Eat 'em and Smile.
Yes, they did choose Eat 'em and Smile.
Right. Even though Van Halen, I think Dave was only on the cover once, and Van Halen was on the cover 3 times, right? You had 2 with Van Halen and 1 with Eddie. And then I think later on, like in the 2000s, you had, some commemorative stuff with Eddie. But, in the heyday, I think you really only had 3 covers. So they liked the band more, but they liked the album. They like Eat 'em and Smile a little better. Interesting that they would choose that.
Yeah. They'd said Ladies Night in Buffalo was their go-to track, according to Rolling Stone.
Interesting.
Before we get into the videos here, there's something I got to try with this screen. I want to see what this looks like. Does it look like I'm Dave Lee Roth right now if I do this? Hold on.
It absolutely does. 100%. Dave, welcome to the show.
Dave wearing a 5150 shirt. Wow, what are the odds? Look. I can't wait to see that footage if I really look like Dave Lee Roth with the native face. I still want to be that for Halloween. One of these times I will.
You absolutely should. Yeah, I would. Yeah, please do that. Please do that.
and you got to be the muscle guy on the 5150.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. What were you saying?
When you read about, the album artwork, I'm always surprised that Dave doesn't get more credit for that album cover because it's so Dave. It's so colorful. And it's his face. Like, could you talk more about a self-centered type singer, which he was always referred to as, it's his face, but it's his face, playing and having fun, and with the Van Halen cover, like they've got this guy with the Van Halen thing over his shoulders. The weight of the world is on this guy's shoulders because honestly, the band probably felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. Were they going to be able to pull this off? Was anybody going to buy this? But I remember always hearing and reading that from the first song, from the first time they jammed, these guys knew they had something special, and they were all very, very pumped about it throughout the making of this album. So I think that their confidence level was high, and maybe the weight of the world was on the label's shoulders, and they weren't as convinced as the band was, but the band was very much, all the interviews that you ever saw or heard of with Van Halen back in those days, they were so psyched to be together with Sammy.
Well, you know what's something that isn't discussed often is out of everyone involved in this, in my opinion, the person who rolled the dice the most was Sammy Hagar. You got to remember, he came off of a huge record, VOA. I Can't Drive 55 was all over MTV. And this was right before the big wave of the 80s bands and the videos were about to come in. And Sammy was definitely going to be on that wave. He had cool look. He knew how to write a catchy song. He's proven, and he was going to ride that wave. Okay, whether he was in Van Halen or not. Dave never left Van Halen. Sammy was riding that wave along with them. Okay, and then he gets this offer. Hey, you want to join this band? I mean, he knew the band. It's not like it was some band down the street playing a local pub, but it was like, right now you get all the marbles. But how do you feel about splitting it 4 ways? That couldn't have been an easy decision. Wait a minute, I gotta replace Dave Lee Roth. Now, that being said, Sammy Hagar didn't replace Dave Lee Roth. I always say he brought his own pair of shoes.
For sure.
And he pulled it off in a different band, and it worked out great. But what part of his brain, because he wasn't allowed, keep in mind, he wasn't allowed to do solo stuff if he joined. So put that into your stipulation too. Like, hey, you're in, we want you in. Here's the catch. You can't do any solo stuff. Right. And here's a guy who likes to write and do his thing. Yeah, and now he was going to be pinned down. And
have to sing someone else's songs, right? He's going to have to sing a few old songs.
Something in his brain, and he definitely has the business smarts, and we'll save that for another show with the tequila, and he had a travel agency and stuff. Talks about in his autobiography. Very smart man, Sammy Hagar, even outside of music smarts. But he was wise enough to know this is the route, and it worked.
Right. Well, I remember always hearing and reading that he was considering retiring at that point. I mean, he had been around since the 70s, even earlier than Van Halen with Montrose. So he had been in the game for a while. And, had he not chosen to join Van Halen and retired on top with VOA, he would have come back a few years later, because rockers never retire. We all know this. I mean, Ozzy's retirement career was longer than his actual career, if you do the math. But at the same time, I absolutely agree with you. The credit goes to Sammy for taking that leap of faith. But I think that you probably agree with me on this, that the energy between those 4 guys, especially when they first got together, before there was any baggage and they were just playing organically together in the studio and making music, it was so refreshing for all of them. It was refreshing for Sammy not to carry all the weight as the band leader and the songwriter and all the, he didn't have to do everything. He had 3 other guys who were more than competent. And the band had a singer who was into being in a band and wasn't all about him. It was about the 4 of them as opposed to the 1 of him. So everyone was so excited. I think that energy carried over into his decision-making process. It had to. It just felt too good to walk away from, I'm sure. And while he didn't get all the marbles by joining a band, he got a lot more marbles. So the Van Halen was at the top of their game in the mid 80s. Like, you didn't get a bigger band at the time. And seemingly everything changed 1985, like right in the middle of the 80s. But I'll throw this out, and I see your Sammy Hagar, and I match you with a Dave. So how about Dave leaving the band and having to start from scratch? He's got nothing, right? He's walking out of the house. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't have a band. He doesn't have songs. He doesn't have a brand. He's David Lee Roth, and they put out this sort of exploratory, EP that kind of gave him a boost of confidence. Like, okay, you can do this. The world loves you, Dave. Go forth and conquer. So he had that sort of confidence behind him in terms of his marketability. But he had to start from scratch. Like, who's the guitar player going to be? And Ed wrote all the music. Who's going to write all the music for Dave? Like, who could do that? You couldn't get your average rock guy to fill Eddie's shoes. You couldn't get your average guitar player, like a session guy, to come in. it needed to be Steve Vai. It couldn't be anybody else but Steve Vai. Maybe a Steve Stevens. And there might have been a small handful of guitarists at the time that could have possibly filled those shoes to the degree that Ed had, originally worn them. But, Dave started from scratch. He had nothing. And I think the math sort of rolls itself out, and we can kind of see it and look back on it now and say the record sales were this, the tour sales were that, etc., and see that Dave had a much bigger uphill battle to win over the crowd than the band did. The band had 3 guys. Dave was 1 guy. So right there, the math is not equal. And Dave's starting from scratch and trying to build up from the ground up, which, not for nothing, but back to the videos. I mean, the videos sold it. The video sold it. That first video, Yankee Rose, you were in. You were in. And how everybody bouncing around on that stage. It was fantastic. And I can remember the world premiere of that video coming up, and I'm studying for like a math final. And let me put it this way, I had to pass this final, or I wasn't going to the next grade. Like it was do or die with this math final. But that video was getting world premiered the night before that test, and I was watching that video every hour on the hour on MTV, no matter what, And I can remember, sort of studying and then counting down the minutes until that video was shown again on MTV, because I watched it every single time for that 12-hour period or whatever. And Van Halen didn't own that realm, right? Van Halen wasn't interested in the video realm, but Dave really went to town. Let's talk about the Going Crazy video. How awesome is that video? You take the California Girls video, you take the Yankee Rose video, you put them together, and you've got this Going Crazy video where Dave's got this big prosthetic fat suit on, and he's doing this whole preamble scripted thing. And how about Yankee Rose, the preamble to that video with his makeup on in the 7-Eleven convenience store sort of thing, with the characters coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times back then, if you were around back then, if you were a fan and you're listening to this, that for months you were repeating the lines from the beginning of that video in school every day. You guys, you and your friends were going back and forth with, let me get a bottle of anything and a glazed donut to go. How many times did we all say that to each other?
Not in my store, you don't.
Exactly, right?
So good. What was the one from Going Crazy? I used to love, my favorite one in Going Crazy was, "No, Your Honor, yes, Your Honor, nice tie, Your Honor. Try the Quadberg over at Herbs." Like, it was
just fantastic.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Steve Vai and his flame guitar.
Oh my God.
I was in hook, line, and sinker. I was in. The other challenges that I think Dave was facing at the time was he was kind of polarizing too, right? So like as a fan, you're not going to not get behind Eddie, right? Like you've all got to appreciate the musical genius there, but Dave's shtick, you either loved or you didn't love. And maybe you tolerated because you loved Eddie and the band. But if you weren't like into Dave, here's a good reason not to go buy his solo stuff. Like you could just stick with the band. And that's why Sammy, I think, was so successful with the band, was he was the polar opposite of Dave. He was just the exact opposite. Dave was all show. Sammy was a musician. Dave wasn't a musician. He was a showman. Like it's two different species there. Comparing those two is like apples and steaks. It's just two different categories. So it's an unfair sort of conversation. They're just two different types of musicians, two types of performers. But Dave, I feel like, just had a bigger uphill battle ahead of him than Van Halen.
Right.
Van Halen would go on to do many albums that were super successful, and Dave's popularity, for other, various reasons, kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit more than Van Halen did.
Well, what's interesting too, if you think about it, here's Van Hagar, 5150, with the #1 album. Here's David Roth, who, like I said earlier, didn't have a #1 record, didn't make the top 10. How did the fans not buy it both? There are fans out there who did not buy both. As a matter of fact, I remember as a kid working.
Give me names. I want names.
We want your names. I'd be curious if you did not buy both these records when they came out. I want to know why. Now, I remember working with this guy at a supermarket who all of a sudden one day said, Van Halen this, Van Halen that. And this was when 5150 came out. He didn't know anything. I promise you, the guy knew nothing about Van Halen prior. I never heard him mention it, never heard him blasting it from his car stereo. And all of a sudden, he's this huge Van Halen fan. So he's one of the many who were, I guess, won over at that moment and weren't into the past. They didn't, or he didn't know Unchained. Then he discovered it. But I'd be curious to see how many people got turned on to Van Halen from the Sammy Hagar 5150 record than anything before.
For sure. Listen, Sammy brought the real blues-based rock singer to the band, right? He was a working man's lead singer, right? He was one of us. He was the same as you and me, so to speak. Dave was a guy from another planet who you were just amazed by, and you just watch wide-eyed because, like, what's he going to do next? What's he going to say next? What's the next song going to be? With Sammy, it was more of a relatable thing. And I think that a lot of people, sort of tuned into that. And with the change in Eddie's sort of direction musically, those two things kind of crossed at the perfect time. They were the perfect storm, and then created this new band and this new sound that was ripe for the picking, because you had all these old Van Halen diehards who were not going to leave no matter who the singer was. And then you had all these new fans. Sammy brought fans to the party too. That's people who just believed in him. Dave didn't have anybody. I mean, how many fans was Billy Sheehan bringing to the party? You know what I mean? Like, Dave had to carry that whole machine, and while guitarists were super hyped on Steve Vai, how many of us were there that were just going to listen to anything Steve did? A lot of people didn't even know who he was at the time. I was still kind of young in his career. So again, I think Dave had a harder battle to fight than the Van Halen boys. But let me throw this out at you. I read recently, someone had said, I always wondered what Van Halen would have sounded like if they would have chosen Billy Squier to be their singer. Okay. So now think about the time, right? And who's out there? Who are we going to pick as a singer? Who are we going to find as a singer? And there's always these stories. There was that story that they were going to have, Patti Smythe, sing, and because she was in Scandal, but she was Valerie's friend and whatever. And, that just wasn't going to fly. But, there was all kinds of speculation that they were talking to different singers. But I mean, Billy Squier and Sammy Hagar, to me, were always this sort of blue jean, pure rock. It was the rock. It wasn't metal. It wasn't hard rock. It was just pure rock. Sammy Hagar did it. Billy Squier did it. I feel like Billy could have, and Billy has a great soprano voice. Like, he could have hit these high notes. He could have done the Zeppelin-esque type thing. So it's an interesting idea that there were other singers out there, and who knows what could have been. So again, AI folks out there, let's hear some Billy Squier.
Listen, you got me thinking when you said that, because I'd never thought about that. And musically, I think Billy Squier would have worked. Where Billy Squier would have failed, and he can write a melody and all that sorts of stuff, and a hook. Where he would have failed, I think would have been the personality thing in the interviews. As I recall, Sammy Hagar, when he entered the room to join Van Halen, or not even really officially joined to jam, he said one of the things he sensed was, what do you mean I'm in charge? Like, this is your band and I'm running the show. That told him that Dave Lee Roth, steered the ship. Eddie and the boys powered the boat, but Dave steered the ship. And Sammy walked into this going, okay, well, here's how I do things and whatever. I don't know if Billy Squier has that. I don't know him personally to say that. But I mean, with the interviews he's done, Sammy Hagar was able to go in there and be confident and say whatever and go toe to toe with the Dave Lee Roth. Sammy was a boxer, so maybe that's where that comes from.
Yeah, maybe.
But
and, I think Sammy too had the right personality in terms of he was happy-go-lucky, right? Like, he was a happy dude. He still is. He's still always a smile with Sammy. Life is a smile with him, and I think he brings that energy. And who knows what Billy would have brought to the band, because chemistry plays a big part in a band. As you know, anybody who's ever had a band, as soon as you replace one person, whether they're a pain in the ass or not, the chemistry changes, and everything might go sideways after that. Even though you got rid of that hangnail, suddenly we can't write a song. Who knows? So chemistry, I think, plays such a huge role in the success of a band. Who knows what anybody else who would have filled Dave's shoes would have done. I think they just happened to get lucky with it. And Dave got lucky too. I mean, listen, that band for that album was magic, right? Yeah. Like, that band from that Eat 'em and Smile band, those songs, everything about that album, I'm a huge fan of it. And again, like to go back to what we were talking about before, who didn't buy both albums? Yeah, man, who didn't buy both
Who
albums?
didn't buy both
I
albums?
mean, I want to throw out the question to you, like, okay, it's 1986. Like you wake up on a random day in the summer, what album are you putting on first? Because I know you're listening to both, right?
I
Like you're going to
love
go through
both.
your albums or your CDs or your cassettes at that point. What are we putting on today? You know, which one do you go to first?
It has to. You know what? I'm not trying to back out of this question, but I will say it really depends on the mood.
Yeah.
If I want to have the windows down and I want to roll through the neighborhood and I want everyone to know that I'm passing by, I'm putting on Eat 'em and Smile.
Right.
If
Right.
I just want to crank up a catchy pop tune to sing along to, like Why Can't This Be Love? I'm going to throw on 5150. I love both records just the same. Are we choosing now? Is that what's going on? Are we leading to this? We have to choose sort of thing? Because I don't know if I can, but
I won't make you choose, dude. Like no pressure here.
All right, I'll
No.
run with one. I'll go with like I said, it depends on my mood. Today's mood, I'm kind of vibing Eat 'em and Smile, so I'll go with the Eat 'em and Smile record.
Yeah. I mean, I think that overall, over the years, I've probably listened to 5150 more than Eat 'em and Smile, you know? But again, yeah, it depends on which way the wind's blowing that day. I completely agree with you. And I wonder, like, how many times I've listened to both. Like, don't you ever wonder that when you hear, like, let's say Bohemian Rhapsody on the radio, and you're like, man, how many times have I actually heard this song? I wish I could know how many times since it came out, since I was a little kid, is this the 1 millionth time I've heard this song? Or like, because you hear it weekly at least, or songs
Right.
like that, or
Right.
even especially Van Halen songs like Why Can't This Be Love? How many times do you think you've heard that?
When's the first time you heard it? Do you remember when you first heard Why Can't This Be
Yes,
Love,
yes.
the debut single?
So
5150?
so I can remember waking up one day for school, and it was a different time back then. Everybody will remember, if you were around back then, that you didn't really know. You were hard pressed to find out when an album was coming out. A lot of times you would read the board at like the local Sam Goody or Musicland or whatever your record store was that would say upcoming releases. And you'd have like a little board behind the cash register that would tell you when something was coming out. Because other than that, you certainly didn't have the internet that you could check for a release date. And
Right.
sometimes you'd get it in a magazine, but maybe you missed it. So record release dates were not as seemingly as important back then or as accessible as they are now. But I can remember waking up one day, getting ready for school, and the DJ on my stereo said, coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to play the brand new Van Halen song. And, I was like, everything stopped. Like I stopped mid teeth brushing to, like hear this song. And I can remember listening to it and just being like, my jaw was on the floor. Like, what is this song? Like, what is that sound? Is that keyboard? Is that guitar? Like I couldn't even really tell because it was like a distorted keyboard sort of. And you didn't know what it was, but it was good. You knew it was good. That's what you knew. That's basically, my introduction to this thing. What about you? What was your first time?
I was on the school bus heading to school. That's what you do when you're on a school bus. and I remember I had my transistor radio. Well, it was actually like a Sony Walkman with the radio on it.
Oh, deluxe.
And
Nice.
I don't know how. I can't remember if I caught wind that they were going to debut the new Van Halen song. And like you said, there wasn't an internet thing, and it was strictly word of mouth or magazine. But I don't know how I knew. Or maybe I was just listening to the radio that morning, but I remember the DJ coming on. It was WMMR, Philadelphia. John DeBella was the morning DJ at the time. And he had said that he had the new Van Halen song. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, here it is. Oh my God, I've heard so much about this. And that he was going to play it. He didn't give a time frame. Hey, it's coming up next or in the next hour. It was just stay glued to your headphones. So I got the little orange puffy headphones on, the Sony Walkman, and it's going in and out. I'm playing the radio, but it's like it's going in and out, the bad reception. So I'm like, yo, I got to hear this song. And now he's about to play it. I'm like, oh shit, we need to fix this radio like real quick, right? So I put my hand out the window with the Walkman there to get
at the school bus window.
At the school bus window. This was, I guess, I was creating an antenna, right? So I put this out And now it's clear. And I'm here. Bum, 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 bum. I'm like, okay, all right, what's going on? And I thought it was a great song. I still do. I think it is a fantastic song. And I think it asks a great question. I was like, oh, yeah, why can't this be love? Like, I thought it was really smart. Anyway, I love the tune. I'm listening. The bus driver is freaking out that my whole arm is like, I'm out the window like this. She's like, you got to pull your arm back in the bus or I'm going to pull over. We're on our way to school. You think I give a shit if we make it to school or not on time? I don't feel tardy. So I'm like, right? So I got this arm out the window. I'm listening. The kids are looking at me. Some are looking at me like, yo, why don't you just put your arm back in? I'm like, what's wrong with this kid? Right? Who cares if we get to school on time? And the other kids are like, what are you doing? And, some of them are like, what's it sound like? What's going on? I go, Van Halen song. So she threatens to pull over. She does pull over. I'd say she held it there for about 3 seconds. I called her bluff. I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like you do your job. I'll do mine. I'm going to listen to this. So, and after the song, of course, then she got moving. Like I said, a few seconds, she got moving, pulled my arm in, and I got to hear Why Can't This Be Love? I thought about it all day at school. And then that weekend, I went out and bought that 45 record we were talking about earlier with the picture sleeve with the straight jackets that I still have to this day as well.
I like to think of the bus driver in that story, being David Lee Roth from the Hot for Teacher video. You're listening to Dan Hagar.
And I'm Waldo, like, no, in the back of the bus. I'm Waldo. That's so funny. Maybe you're right. Or maybe it was like David Roth's mom or somebody. It had to be somebody part of the Roth camp. Well, or Patty Smythe, maybe.
But God bless them. You know what? She pulled over the bus and then just waited.
She pulled over the bus, dude. Real talk she wasn't there.
She didn't get up and then come back and slap you upside the head, with a cigarette dangling out of her mouth.
Yeah.
She let you listen to the song.
Over and was like, pull your. I was like, I'm ignoring you because I want to hear this song. You're ruining the moment right now, bus driver. My family pays taxes. We paid for this bus. Just do what you're supposed to do. All right. Just get moving. She held over there for, like I said, 3-5 seconds. And then she gave up because I was not giving it. I was like, nope. After the song, we got 3 minutes and we're good.
Fantastic.
Stop it.
All right. Well, listen, man, I think it's safe to say that both albums stand up. Yes. Both albums are basically on any Van Halen's regular rotation. And, I like to walk away from an album for a while and come back to it refreshed, with fresh ears and not listen to something, to death. As soon as I feel like I've listened to it enough, or almost enough, I back away from it for a while. And I recently came back to 5150 and, man, it holds up. It's great. It's timeless in a way, even though it has Alex has the electronic drums, you still have a sound, and Eddie's sound, his tone is so indicative of that album and that era. He's got the headless guitar, the Steinberger that he plays on Get Up and a few of the other songs. It's all so of the time, but at the same time, timeless. And the same can be said for Eat 'Em and Smile. It's of the time. It's Dave at his most Dave, and the lyrics and the bombast of that album is pure David Lee Roth. And Steve Vai, as I said before, you couldn't find a better guitarist to be Dave's foil for sure. And so they're both a snapshot of a moment in time, but again, to your point, timeless for sure.
Timeless. And hey, you brought up the video before of Yankee Rose. Two things that came to mind of that video, besides the things we mentioned, was the larger than life microphone. He was jumping on. Whatever happened to that thing? Right. And when he shook his ass at me and on the screen there, remember David Lee Roth puts his butt cheeks there up to the screen and with his assless chaps.
I was recently told that assless chaps is an oxymoron. Chaps are assless. That's how they are. You don't need to say assless in front of it. And I was corrected by my kids for almost an entire dinner once. Over that, so I'm sorry. I got a little PTSD. I've got to correct you as well. But anyway,
Dave proved you wrong. Dave proved everyone wrong. No, this is why they're calling this.
the thing about Dave is that he did always take chances, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
even on the 1984 tour, you saw him in these outfits where he's wearing like a red jock strap over his spandex. Like, what are we doing, Dave? Like, what is that? But somehow the ladies loved him. Like he
Yeah.
could do no wrong. And so when he comes to Eat 'Em and Smile, he's wearing the assless chaps, which he wore through Van Halen too. But like,
Yeah.
the sort of outfits he was wearing were clearly based from the ladies section of the store, like they
No,
just
for
are.
sure.
His eyeliner, his haircut, like but that was the time, and it was what bands were headed back towards, and he was leading the charge as he did.
Yeah.
So I say, listen, thumbs up to both albums. As soon as we're done here, I'm gonna go put one of those on. I guess we'll see.
Here's what you do.
But
Here's what you do. If it's, I agree, thumbs up for both records. You play side A of one, and you play side B of the other. That could be another argument or discussion.
I'll take it one step further, as I try to, as at all times. Put them both on a playlist and hit shuffle and see what comes out. One song after the
crazy
other. Boom,
talk.
boom. That's
smoking. Hey, before we sign off here, I have to share this with you. You're not expecting this, and I know you'll remember this. Okay, so for those of you listening here, Tor and I have known each other for years upon years, and our first and as of now most recent conversation always about Van Halen. Okay, that's how this all came about. Anyhow, man, I'm going back some years. We were hanging out, and you brought me a gift. Do you remember what the gift was?
I do.
The T-shirt?
Yep.
So I have it right here now. I wanted to share this on here. And I was just thrilled and honored that you gave me this shirt, because I know that you collect T-shirts.
Yes.
So for you to give this to me meant the world to me, right? And I was like, I remember when you first gave it to me, I was like, I can't take this. Like, I need to. I don't know if this is cool. You should probably keep this. You're like, no, dude, you need to have this shirt. And I've never seen this shirt prior until you gave it to me. So I want to share it here. So let me know if you can't see it fully in the screen.
Yeah.
But it's the Fabulous Picasso Brothers, obviously.
Put it over your face. Put it over your face.
Going Crazy video and stuff.
Up, higher. There we go. Yes.
Yeah, that's better, right? See it?
Right.
Isn't that great shirt? Look at that. In the character, I'm going to pull close here, get a look at the character.
Right,
and then
with the background, with the mud flap girls in the background.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then the back of the shirt.
Forget about it.
Forget about it. So good. Dude, I even have the tag on here. I can't wear this shirt because I'm afraid. You know what I mean? I was like, I had it up on my wall in the Lower East Side when I was living there. And I was like, there's no way. I don't want to fuck up this shirt. You know what I mean? It's fucking awesome, dude. I can't thank you enough. I should have worn this one today, maybe. But like I said, I didn't want to miss it.
Dude, you know what? I don't remember that shirt. Okay. To be honest, when you were talking about a shirt, I thought I gave you a Dave TV shirt.
No,
did I give you a white T-shirt that said Dave TV from the logo from the Just a Gigolo video where they have the Dave TV logo on there? Did I not give you that shirt?
Maybe you meant to, and I got this one instead, and now you're like really pissed off.
No. I forgot. Now that I see it, I totally remember the situation, and you absolutely needed to have it because I knew that you were such a Dave fan, and as am I. But and I love a good vintage tee, especially that one, man, because I've never seen it anywhere before or after.
No, I was going to frame it. Actually,
yeah, for sure, it's super rare. But the one I'm thinking of was just a red and black. It was a white T-shirt with a red and black logo of the Dave TV thing from the Just a Gigolo video. And I thought that's the one that I gave you. Who did I give that one to?
I don't know, but
am I only giving away so many shirts? What the hell's going on?
Right?
Man, those 3 Cups days, those were some good times, I guess.
That was a bar we hung out at, man. Those were good times. And these are good times here now on the Mighty Van Halen Podcast.
That's right, everybody. Listen, until we see you again, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Mighty VH Podcast. That's Mighty_VH_ podcast on Instagram. And be sure to watch our episodes on YouTube. You can listen to them on Spotify. You can listen to them on Apple Music and just about any other platform that's out there that hosts fine podcasts such as this one. And Tommy, tell them once again where they can email us with any questions, comments, or complaints.
The Mighty Van Halen Podcast at gmail.com. Hey, hit us up with what album do you think is best or worst or whatever? Maybe you don't care, but if you didn't care, you wouldn't be here with us now. We
What are you doing
appreciate it.
here? Get the hell out of here.
What are you doing? You're in the wrong podcast, pal.
You just spent an hour hanging out in the wrong room.
What are you waiting for? New Kids on the Block update or something? You're in the wrong house. Anyway.
All right, everybody. Until next time, happy trails.
Happy trails.